April 13, 1940, the Ofotfjord, northern Norway. 5 British tribal-class destroyers, HMS Cossack, Bedouin, Punjabi, Eskimo, and Sikh, push into the narrow fjord at 30 knots. Ahead of them, 8 German destroyers are cornered. Low on fuel, low on ammunition, trapped since the First Battle of Narvik 3 days earlier, HMS Cossack enters Narvik harbour alone. She rounds the headland and finds the German destroyer Dieter von Ruder broadside on at point-blank range. 8 4.7-inch guns open fire simultaneously. The broadside weight is 400 pounds of steel every 6 seconds. Cossack takes 7 hits in return, runs aground, but keeps firing. The German ship exhausts her ammunition first. Her crew scuttle her and abandon ship. Deeper in the fjord, HMS Eskimo pursues Hermann Quena into Herjungsfjord and sinks her with gunfire. Then Eskimo pushes into Rombaksfjord after the last survivors. A torpedo from Georg Thiele strikes forward and blows off Eskimo's entire bow. Everything forward of a turret is gone. B turret, now the most forward part of the ship, continues firing until its ammunition runs out. Eskimo withdraws stern first. She will be rebuilt and fight for 5 more years. By the end of the day, all 8 German destroyers are sunk, beached, or scuttled. Combined with the losses from the first battle 3 days earlier, Germany has lost 10 modern destroyers, half of the Kriegsmarine's entire destroyer strength, eliminated in a single week. The ships that did the killing carried 8 guns where every other British destroyer carried 4. They mounted 4 torpedo tubes where standard destroyers carried 8 or 10. The Admiralty called them fleet destroyers. Their critics called them overgunned. The Germans who faced them in the fjords of Narvik called them something else entirely. How did a class of destroyers that broke every rule of British naval doctrine become the most feared surface combatants of the war? By 1934, the Royal Navy had a problem. Britain's standard interwar destroyers, the A through I classes, displaced around 1,340 tons and carried 4 single 4.7-inch guns. They were being outclassed by every major navy on Earth. Japanese Fubuki-class destroyers carried 6 5-inch guns in twin turrets. Italian Navigatori-class ships displaced nearly 2,000 tons. France was building super-destroyers exceeding 2,100 tons, and Germany's new Type 1934 destroyers were being built at over 2,000 tons with 5 5-inch guns. The Admiralty's Director of Naval Construction, Sir Arthur Johns, initiated at least 8 design proposals between 1934 and early 1936. The concept evolved from a study designated Design 5, originally envisioned as a small fleet cruiser, gradually adapted downward into a large destroyer. The final design pushed the destroyer leader treaty limit of 1,850 tons standard displacement to its absolute maximum. The first 7 ships were ordered on the 10th of March, 1936, 3 days after Germany remilitarized the Rhineland. A second batch of 9 followed in June. The decision that defined the class was deliberate and controversial. 8 4.7-inch guns in 4-power-operated twin mountings, double the gun armament of any previous British destroyer. The price was equally deliberate: a single quadruple torpedo launcher, 4 tubes with no reloads, where standard destroyers carried 8 to 10. For decades, Royal Navy doctrine held that destroyers were primarily torpedo platforms. Their purpose was the massed flotilla attack against enemy capital ships. Guns were secondary, for screening and self-defense. This thinking was embedded from Jutland and interwar fleet exercises. The tribals inverted the equation entirely. The commander of the Mediterranean fleet was dismissive. If you wanted that much firepower, he argued, you should build a real cruiser. Others protested that halving the torpedo salvo rendered the ships useless in their core mission. 16 ships were ordered from 7 private shipyards across Britain. At roughly £520,000 per ship, nearly double the cost of a standard H-class destroyer, the Admiralty was gambling an enormous sum on an unproven doctrine. The tribal class displaced 1,870 tons standard and approximately 2,519 tons at full load. Overall length was 377 feet, with a 36-foot 6-inch beam. 3 Admiralty 3-drum boilers drove 2 Parsons single reduction, geared turbines producing 44,000 shaft horsepower through 2 propeller shafts. Maximum speed was 36 knots. HMS Cossack achieved 36.2 knots on trials. Range was 5,700 nautical miles at 15 knots. Standard complement was 190 officers and men. rising to 219 when configured as a flotilla leader. The main armament consisted of 8 4.7-inch QF Mark 12 guns in 4 twin CP-19 mountings, super-firing pairs forward and aft. Each gun fired a 50-pound shell at 2,650 feet per second, with a rate of fire of 10 to 12 rounds per minute. Maximum range was approximately 17,000 yards at 40 degrees elevation. Barrel life was around 1,400 rounds per gun. Standard destroyers carried 8 to 10 21-inch torpedo tubes in 2 quadruple or quintuple mounts. The tribals mounted a single quadruple launcher amidships, 4 tubes, no reloads. The torpedo armament was, as one historian noted, squeezed between massive superstructures almost as an afterthought. The original anti-aircraft fit comprised 1 quadruple 2-pounder pom-pom and 2 quadruple Vickers .50-inch machine guns. After the losses of HMS Gurkha and HMS Afridi to air attack in April and May 1940, the Admiralty ordered X-turret removed and replaced with a twin 4-inch QF Mark 16 mounting capable of 80-degree elevation. The near-useless .50 caliber machine guns were progressively replaced by 20mm Oerlikons, and depth charge capacity increased from 20 to 46. The Tribals were also the first British destroyers to receive the fuse-keeping clock fire control computer, a mechanical predictor that became standard on every subsequent British wartime destroyer. A distinctive clipper bow gave them excellent seakeeping and a rakish silhouette that made them instantly recognisable from any angle. The Tribal class announced itself to the world before the shooting war had properly begun. On the 16th of February 1940, HMS Cossack under Captain Philip Vian forced her way into Jossingfjord, Norway, to board the German supply ship Altmark. The Altmark was carrying 299 British merchant sailors captured by the pocket battleship Graf Spee. Acting on direct orders from Winston Churchill, Vian's boarding party of 33 men, armed with rifles and bayonets, overwhelmed the German crew in hand-to-hand fighting. When they opened the hatches where the prisoners were confined, the boarding party shouted the words that became legend. "The Navy's here!" It was the last major boarding action fought by the Royal Navy. 2 months later came Narvik and the carnage in the fjords. The destruction of 10 German destroyers across both battles represented half of Germany's modern destroyer strength, eliminated in a single week. HMS Eskimo's refusal to stop fighting after losing her entire bow became a symbol of the class. Often bowless, never bowed, as one account put it. In May 1941, Vian's 4th destroyer flotilla, HMS Cossack, Maori, Sikh, Zulu, and the Polish destroyer ORP Pioran was detached to hunt the battleship Bismarck. Through the night of the 26th to 27th of May, in gale-force winds and mountainous seas, the 4 Tribals harried the crippled battleship. They illuminated her with starshell and launched 16 torpedoes in 9 separate attacks. Bismarck fired her 15-inch main battery at the destroyers, but scored no direct hits. The Tribals' critical contribution was maintaining contact throughout the night, keeping Bismarck's exhausted crew at action stations, and confirming her position for Admiral Tovey's battleships to deliver the final blow at dawn. HMS Cossack displaced 1,870 tons. Bismarck displaced 41,700 tons, 22 times the size. In the Mediterranean, the Tribals fought some of the war's most intense surface actions. On the 16th of April 1941, HMS Mohawk and Nubian joined 2 J-class destroyers in intercepting an Italian convoy off Tunisia in the Battle of the Tarago Convoy. All 5 merchant ships and all 3 Italian escort destroyers were sunk. But as the Italian destroyer Luca Tarigo went down, her mortally wounded captain, with his leg shot off, ordered a final torpedo spread. 1 torpedo struck HMS Mohawk, sinking her with the loss of 41 crew. The Battle of Cape Bon on the 13th of December 1941 was a textbook tribal action. HMS Sikh and HMS Maori, with HMS Legion and the Dutch destroyer Isaac Sweers, ambushed 2 Italian light cruisers from astern at barely 1,000 yards, using radar and the dark Tunisian coastline for concealment. Both cruisers were sent to the bottom within 5 minutes. Allied casualties were 2 men wounded. Italian losses exceeded 800 dead between the 2 ships. 2 cruisers destroyed by destroyers in 5 minutes. Gunpowder made the difference. If you're finding this deep dive interesting, subscribing helps more than you know. By 1944, the the surviving tribals formed the backbone of the 10th Destroyer Flotilla, a mixed Royal Navy and Royal Canadian Navy formation that dominated the English Channel before and during D-Day. HMS Tartar, Ashanti, Eskimo, and Nubian served alongside Canadian tribals HMCS Haida, Huron, Athabascan, and Iroquois. On the night of the 28th to 29th of April 1944, HMCS Haida and Athabascan engaged German torpedo boats T-24 and T-27. A torpedo from T-24 sank HMCS Athabascan with the loss of 128 crew. Haida drove T-27 aground with gunfire, then turned back to rescue 44 of Athabascan's survivors from the freezing Channel waters. 3 days after D-Day, at the Battle of Ushant on the 9th of June 1944, the full 10th Flotilla intercepted the German 8th Destroyer Flotilla, including Narvik-class destroyers Z-32 and Z-24. ZH-1 was sent to the bottom by combined fire from Tartar and Ashanti. Z-32 was driven ashore and destroyed. After Ushant, the Germans never again attempted a major surface sortie toward the Normandy beaches. Canadian naval records from the period state that German torpedo boat commanders were under instructions to head toward the coast and avoid combat when they identified tribal silhouettes. At Ushant, the German flotilla commander recognized the tribals and immediately ordered his Narvik-class destroyers to disengage, attempting to flee toward Brest rather than fight. The comparison with the German Type 1936A Narvik class is the most revealing, because these were the destroyers specifically designed to counter ships like the tribals. The Narvik class displaced 2,543 tons standard and over 3,500 tons at full load, nearly 1,000 tons heavier than a tribal. They carried 4 to 5 15-centimetre guns firing a 100-pound shell, nearly double the weight of a tribal's 50-pound round. On paper, the German ship was the heavier puncher, but weight of broadside per minute told the real story. 8 tribal guns firing 10 rounds per minute at 50 pounds per shell delivered approximately 4,000 pounds of steel every 60 seconds. 4 Narvik guns at 8 rounds per minute at 100 pounds delivered roughly 3,200 pounds per minute. The tribal threw more steel faster, and the tribal's power-rammed twin mountings maintained their rate of fire in North Atlantic gales, while German crews had to muscle 100-pound shells into manually loaded breeches in mostly open mountings. In heavy weather, the gap widened dramatically. The German ships also suffered from crippling engineering problems. Their high-pressure Wagner boilers operated at over 1,000 pounds per square inch, compared to 300 for British Admiralty 3-drum boilers. Superheater alloys were brittle and corroded easily. Feedwater quality requirements were impossibly stringent. Design range was 4,400 nautical miles, but so much fuel had to be retained as ballast for stability that effective range often fell to barely 1,800 nautical miles. A tribal could cruise 3 times as far on 1/3 less displacement. The Italian Soldati class was a near contemporary at similar displacement, but carried only 4 120mm guns, half the tribal's firepower, with inferior fire control and no radar until late in the war. The American Fletcher class outperformed the tribals in nearly every metric, but they were a later design entering service from 1942 with the benefit of 4 additional years of wartime experience. Their 5 5-inch 38 caliber dual-purpose guns, capable of 85-degree elevation and firing 15 to 22 rounds per minute with superb Mark 37 fire control, represented the ideal the tribals had been reaching toward. The tribals were designed in 1934 to 36, when such technologies did not exist. They got the doctrine right before the technology caught up. Of 16 Royal Navy tribals, 12 were lost. A 75% loss rate, the highest proportional casualties of any British destroyer class. HMS Matabele, torpedoed by U-454 in the Arctic on the 17th of January 1942, sank in under 2 minutes. In freezing Arctic waters, only 2 men survived from a crew of 238. HMS Seek absorbed approximately 80 hits from shore batteries at Tobruk, while her captain refused to abandon ship as long as a single gun could fire. 6 of the 12 ships lost were destroyed by air attack, exposing the one genuine design flaw: not too many guns, but guns that could not elevate high enough to fight aircraft effectively. The 4 survivors, HMS Ashanti, Eskimo, Nubian, and Tartar, served from 1938 to 1945. Nubian accumulated 13 battle honours, matching the record for a World War II destroyer. All 4 were worn out by continuous service and scrapped between 1948 and 1949. Today, HMCS Hyder, the Canadian tribal credited with sinking more enemy surface tonnage than any other Canadian warship, rides at anchor at Pier 9, Hamilton Harbour, Ontario. She's the last surviving tribal-class destroyer in the world, designated a National Historic Site of Canada. Think back to that morning in Narvik. HMS Eskimo with her bow blown off, B turret still firing, HMS Cossack aground in the harbour, all 8 guns hammering a German destroyer into silence. The critics who said 8 guns were too many for a destroyer were wrong. The doctrine that insisted destroyers existed to launch torpedoes was wrong. The German commanders who thought their heavier shells could compensate for fewer barrels were wrong. And the Kriegsmarine flotilla commanders who received orders to avoid combat with the tribals knew exactly why. 16 ships built, 12 lost in action. Every major theatre of the war, 8 guns per ship, 96 rounds per minute. The tribal class made gun-armed destroyer doctrine reality.